Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm here again with a brand new story. Enjoy the story, and don't forget to share your valuable thoughts in the comments.
And even today, decades later, no one can fully explain what really happened. This is not just a story about royalty. This is a story about power, betrayal, mystery, and a disappearance that still haunts an entire nation. In the early 1970s, deep in West Africa, there was a small but wealthy kingdom known for its gold, ancient traditions, and deeply rooted royal lineage. It wasn't the kind of kingdom you'd see in modern headlines, but within its borders, the royal family held immense influence. In the center of it all was Prince Adisa Kofi. He wasn't just any prince. He was educated in Europe, fluent in multiple languages, charismatic, visionary, and most importantly, he was next in line to become king. People loved him. Unlike many royal heirs, Adisa spent time among his people. He visited villages, spoke to farmers, and often rejected the luxurious lifestyle expected of him. Many believed he would be the ruler who would modernize the kingdom while still respecting its traditions. But not everyone was happy about that, because change creates enemies. In 1974, the king, Adisa's father, fell seriously ill. The entire kingdom knew what that meant. The transition of power was near. Inside the royal palace, tension quietly began to rise. There were whispers. Some elders feared Adisa was too Western, too progressive, too willing to challenge ancient customs. Others, however, saw him as the future. And then there was his uncle, Chief Adisa Kofi, a powerful man in his own right, a traditionalist, someone who believed the old ways should never be questioned. For years, he had quietly positioned himself close to power. Some believed he even expected to rule if the opportunity ever came. On a warm evening in August 1974, Prince Adisa Kofi attended a ceremonial event. It was a ceremonial event. Music, drums, dancing, nothing unusual. Eyewitnesses later said everything seemed perfectly normal. Adisa laughed, spoke with elders, even danced briefly with children from a nearby village. But sometime after midnight, he disappeared. At first, no one noticed. It wasn't unusual for royal members to retire early or move between sections of the palace. But by morning, there was panic. His room was empty. His guards claimed they had seen nothing. There were no signs of struggle, no forced entry, no blood, nothing. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. The kingdom immediately launched a massive search. Villages were questioned, forests were combed, nearby rivers were inspected, but there was no trace. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. Still, nothing. Then came the rumors. Some said he had been kidnapped. Others claimed he had been assassinated. But the most chilling theory was that he was taken by his own people. In many traditional African societies, royal succession is not always straightforward. Spiritual beliefs, ancestral approval, and secret rituals can play a role. Some insiders whispered that Adisa had refused to participate in certain sacred rituals required before becoming king. If true, this could have been seen as betrayal, or worse, a threat to the balance of power. One former palace servant, who later spoke anonymously, claimed something terrifying. He said the night Adisa disappeared, he heard raised voices from a restricted section of the palace. voices of elders, and one voice pleading, begging. He never saw Adisa again. Years passed. The king eventually died, and surprisingly, Chief Adisa Kofi assumed control. Not officially crowned as king, but effectively ruling. That alone raised suspicions, because Adisa was the rightful heir, unless he was no longer alive.
International attention briefly touched the case. Journalists tried to investigate, but access to the kingdom was limited. Information was controlled, and those who asked too many questions were quietly turned away. In 1982, nearly 8 years after the disappearance, something strange happened. A hunter in a remote forest area claimed he discovered human remains. Along with them, a piece of royal fabric. The pattern matched garments worn only by members of the royal family. The news spread quickly. Could this be Prince Adisa? The remains were examined locally, but before any official confirmation could be made, they disappeared again. No records, no reports, no explanation. Some believe it was a cover-up. Others think the remains were never real to begin with, a planted story to close the case. As decades passed, the mystery only deepened. Children grew up hearing stories of the lost prince. Elders spoke in hushed tones, and inside the palace, no one dared speak openly about that night. But perhaps the most unsettling detail came years later. A retired palace guard on his deathbed reportedly confessed something to his family. He claimed that Prince Adisa never left the palace that night. According to him, the prince was taken into an underground chamber, a place few knew existed, used for secret royal rituals. The guard said he was ordered to stand watch. He heard chanting, drums, and then silence. The next morning, he was told one thing: forget what you heard, forget what you know. He obeyed for decades, until his final breath. No official investigation ever confirmed this story, but in a place where tradition and secrecy run deep, truth can be hard to separate from myth. Today, the kingdom still exists, but in a much more modern form. The old palace remains, partially renovated, partially abandoned. And according to locals, certain sections are still off-limits. Visitors sometimes report strange things: cold spots, echoes in empty halls, a feeling of being watched. But of course, stories grow over time, especially when the truth is never fully known. So what really happened to Prince Adisa Kofi? Was he betrayed by those closest to him, silenced for challenging tradition, or did something far more mysterious take place within those palace walls? One thing is certain: a future king vanished without a clay. No body, no closure, no justice. And somewhere in the heart of Africa, the mystery of the lost prince still lingers, waiting. For nearly 40 years, the story of Prince Adisa Kofi remained locked inside rumor, fear, and silence. Then, in 2012, something happened that nobody expected. A forgotten archive was opened, and what was inside made the old mystery feel even darker than before. It began in the capital city's National Records Building. A young historian named Daniel Mercer, an American researcher studying African royal histories, was given rare permission to access sealed colonial-era documents. Most files were boring: trade records, old maps, administrative letters. But deep inside a dusty metal cabinet, Daniel found a folder with no classification stamp,
no title, just a handwritten label, case file, KK, Royal Disappearance, restricted. His heart slowed, because KK stood for the kingdom, and there was only one royal disappearance in its modern history, Prince Adisa Kofi. Inside the folder were documents that had never been publicly seen, police notes, palace communications, and something even more disturbing, a confidential letter from an unknown military advisor dated just 3 days after the prince vanished. It read, "The situation has been contained. Succession stability is now secure. Further inquiries are unnecessary for national safety." No name, no signature, just authority and fear. Daniel didn't sleep that night, because that wasn't a missing person report. That was a controlled silence. He continued reading. Another document stood out. It was a transcript of a private meeting between senior palace officials and external advisors. One line was underlined repeatedly. "The prince cannot proceed with reforms. The Ancestral Council has objections that cannot be ignored." Ancestral Council, not political council, not government, something deeper, something older. Daniel's research began to shift direction. He stopped asking what happened to the prince and started asking who had the power to make him disappear without consequences. That's when he met someone unexpected, a woman named Adisa Kofi. She claimed to be a distant relative of the royal family. She had lived most of her life outside the palace system, but she had heard stories passed down privately through her grandmother. Stories that were never written down. When Daniel showed her the file, her expression changed immediately. She didn't look surprised, she looked afraid. And then she said something chilling. They didn't just remove him, they erased him from the timeline on purpose. Adisa explained something that was never part of official history. In certain royal traditions of that region, there existed a concept called spiritual succession control. It wasn't law, it wasn't government policy, it was belief-based authority. And belief in that system, sometimes stronger than law itself. According to Adisa, Prince Adisa had planned reforms that would reduce the power of traditional councils. He wanted transparency in royal decisions. He wanted education systems that replaced certain inherited spiritual rules, and that made him dangerous to the old order. But then came the most controversial claim. Adisa said that before his disappearance, there was a secret gathering of elders. A decision was made, not political, not legal, but symbolic. They believed the prince was destabilizing the spiritual balance of kingship, and in their worldview, that required removal.
Daniel was skeptical until he found another document, a coded message buried in diplomatic correspondence. It referenced a phrase, Operation Quiet Crown. No explanation, no official record, just that name. And then came the final piece, a map, marking a location deep in the forest outside the capital, a place labeled only as Old Covenant Site. Locals refused to speak about it. Every time Daniel mentioned it, people changed the subject or walked away. Still, he went. The journey took 2 days. No roads, only dense forest and narrow animal trails. When he finally reached the site, he found ruins, stone structures covered in moss, circular formations, and in the center, a collapsed underground entrance. It looked ancient,
but also intentionally sealed, like something had been buried not by time, but by people. Daniel recorded everything, but as he stood there, he noticed something strange. The air was different, heavy, silent. Not just natural silence, but intentional silence. That night, back in his tent, he heard movement outside. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. But when he opened the tent, nothing was there. Only footprints circling his camp, leading back into the forest. He left the next morning, and he never returned alone again.